Welcome back, Heron and Riverside Scholars. Miss Parsons here, and today we're going to talk about Skill 23, solving radical equations. The goal is to solve for the variable value that makes the statement true. And we're going to do this in two main steps. Our first step is to isolate the radical part of the equation. And step two is to undo the root or the radical, okay? Well, how do we undo this root or radical? Well, we're going to do the inverse operation, okay? Just like the inverse of addition is subtraction, the inverse of multiplication is division, okay? If we want to do the inverse of a root, so say I have the square root of x, to undo that, I raise it to the same power as the index to undo it. Okay, so that is the inverse operation to undo the root radical. So if I look at example 1, okay, remember my first step is to get the radical by itself. Well, it is already by itself. There's nothing in front, there's nothing behind it, just the equal sign and 5. So we are good to go for step 1. So I want to undo this. Okay, remember if the root is not written there, it's a 2. So to undo it, I'm going to raise it to the second power. And remember, we have to balance our equations, keep it fair on both sides. So if I do it to one side, I have to do it with the other side. Okay, so when that happens, all I'm left with is x plus 1, what comes out. 5 squared is 25. So I'm going to go ahead and solve this. Minus 1 to both sides, and x equals 24. Okay, for example B, I want to get this by itself, okay, which means this 5's got to go, and this 2 has to go, okay? So what do I start with? We always are going to start with our addition and subtraction, so we're going to get rid of the plus 2 first by doing the opposite, minus 2 to both sides, 5 times the cubed root of x equals 10. Divide both sides by 5 to get rid of that. I get the cubed root of x equals 2. All right, now I have to undo this radical. Since the index is 3, I'm going to raise both to the third power. When that undoes the radical, I'm just left with what's inside, which is just x. 2 to the third power. 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8. Okay. Remember, you can stop and pause this video at any time. Okay, for C, I've got to get the radical by itself, which means I got to get rid of this minus 4. So what do you do to both sides? We've got to add 4, which gives me the cubed root of 13x minus 1 equals 0 plus 4 is 4. Okay, now that the radical is by itself, I can undo it. What power am I going to raise it to? The same as the index. So I raise both sides to the third power. I'm left with what's inside the radical. And 4 to the third power, which is 64. Now you're just solving this like a two-step algebraic equation where I'm going to undo the minus 1 by adding plus 1 to both sides. Gives me 13x equals 65. Divide both sides by 13. So x equals 65 divided by 13 gives me 5. Okay, here. This is what needs to be by itself. So that means that this 4 and this minus 7 have to go. So where do we start? We always start with addition and subtraction. So that means the negative minus 7 has to go. So I'm going to add 7 to both sides. Gives me 4 times the 4th root of x squared equals 20. Got to get rid of this 4. So I divide by 4. Root of x squared equals 5. Okay, we finally got this highlighted piece, just the radical by itself. So to undo it, I raise it to the 4th power, both sides. And I'm left with what's inside the radical, x squared. 5 to the 4th power is 625. Okay, I'm not done though. I have x squared here. Don't want x squared, I just want x. Okay, so to do that, we have to take the square root of both sides. Square root of 625 is, if you put 5, you're only halfway right. Because remember, anytime you take the square root, you have to account for both the positive and the negative. Okay, so hopefully today you learned how to solve an equation with radical expressions. Just remember that you have to isolate the radical and undo it by raising it to the same power as the index. All right, hope you guys are having a great week.